Hi, welcome to the channel if you've never been here before, and if you have been here before, then welcome back. So, this is an update on my Lego D&D music pack. For those of you that haven't been here before, I am writing a collection of Lego D&D video game loops. It's a work in progress, and I'm about halfway through the project, but I wanted to kind of show off some of the progress that I've made so far. Today I'm going to show you the music I wrote for the Lego Halfling Druid. Part of what makes writing Lego D&D video game music challenging is because they have very different personalities. Lego tends to be childlike and quirky and fun, whereas D&D is a lot more serious and adult. Occasionally you're able to find opportunities to blend those two things in a fun way, and I think that the Halfling Druid really does that really well. So I'm going to show you what I made, and then I'll talk about how I made it. So one of the things I really want to feature in this video was some of the difficulties that I had getting to the end result that you just heard. So let's take a look at, first off, what I thought would be a good idea. So if you look at my project, everything that's highlighted here, this is all the stuff that you just heard. Everything around it are all of the ideas that I had. Originally, I had it in a completely different time signature. The biggest difficulty that I really had with this was not finding sound, but more of what the composition was going to be like. The instruments I chose and the sounds that I wanted, I kind of knew going into before I ever started. Because if you think about the character, he's a halfling and he's druid. He's a very nature-focused character. So I wanted percussion that was very natural and nature-focused. Everything that's here is wooden in some way. Apple box, pulley stick, log drums, wood box. Again, the biggest trouble that I had was finding what I wanted the composition to sound like. What I really wanted it to sound like was a nighttime party with all of the halfling druids, where they're all just hanging out, and you just walk in and you get this idea of these nature-loving hobbits, essentially. So I thought that both the Irish harp and the dulcimer would sound really good, but I was having a hard time figuring out some kind of riff or melody that they could play together. Again, this is what I originally came up with. And there's even some examples over here of some other ideas I had, where it was more focused on the harp and the dulcimer kind of played a part. I even removed some notes trying to figure out a good groove. What I eventually realized is that it does not need to be in 6/8. This needs to be a 4/4 time. It just sounds more natural that way. So again, when you hear this together, it makes a lot of sense. It has more of that bouncy kind of natural, fun, party type of feel. I also took a little bit of inspiration from Concerning Hobbits, the song that plays whenever you watch anything regarding the Shire in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And from that, I really just took this bass pizzicato that's kind of bouncing back and forth. Now again, I wanted to find a sound that made sense for a Halfling Druid, and I felt like the melody had to come from some kind of wood instrument. So I actually have here an Irish flute. Now, if you just saw my session, you probably noticed some interesting instruments played in there. In a previous video, I talked about one of the things that makes Lego music so definable is that it's quirky. And part of what makes it quirky is finding sounds that don't really normally make sense in the context of what you are creating. And so I decided to incorporate that idea into this song especially. And so what you have here is just some accents from some things that aren't typical within a fantasy genre. For example, you have the mandolin, which only shows up just this one time playing this tremolo part, but I felt like gave this really interesting little, again, this little accent on top of this. You can hear it very subtle there, kind of give it a little bit extra. And then after the mandolin, of course, you have the banjo. On its own, it sounds wrong. You would not hear this and think this is part of a D&D video game. But the point is that it's actually doubling the hammered dulcimer. And when it's all together, it really just adds a little bit of a different color. So you can't really tell, oh, hey, that's a banjo, but you should be able to hear there's something about this that is just a little bit quirkier, a little bit weirder. It should fit in with the world of Lego a little bit better. Now, about this A section, so I kind of have them split up a little bit into A section, B section, although I don't think I did a very good job doing a marker here, because that should be A prime, this should be the B section, this should be the C section actually. But what you have, just kind of top off this A section, is you have the same thing repeated twice. But what I want to focus on a little bit for a second here is this percussion line. It's nothing fancy. But again, I imagine that if they're all sitting around in the woods playing a song, they're not going to have the most incredible things at their disposal, but what they have are sticks and logs and drums that they made from animal hides and things like that. Now, here's a spoiler for a video I'm going to make at some point in the near future. One of the things that is consistent amongst almost every single Lego video game is an instrument that really has a very wood-like sound, is very blocky, and I feel like really defines Lego music in general. And that is the marimba. So of course I had to add in a marimba into this track. When we get here into what is the B section, you have the strings really taking over with just the Hardanger fiddle, violins, and cello. Oh, and the bass, of course. but you still need to have the rhythm and the groove. So the dulcimer continues, the banjo continues doubling with the dulcimer, but now you have the marimba that's an extra little part of the B section. Again, the idea is not really that you hear it and say, that's marimba. When you hear it on its own, it's obvious, but when you hear it together, it should just be a little bit more, that adds a little more interest into that section. So all together, so then when we finally get to the C section, I call it a C section because not a C section like that. Not a C section like you are thinking probably. But when we get to section C, it's going to sound very similar to everything you've heard before. Banjo's out. It sounds a lot like the intro because we're trying to loop back to the intro. But really this is its own part because it just has little moments that stick out to make it different from the A section. The bassoon and the bass flutes. They kind of, the bassoon and the bass flute have kind of their own moments, as well as the banjo kind of having its own little thing. What I like, I found this by accident. This little thing that the banjo does at the end actually ends up throughout this entire track. So you hear it in 3 different places. You'll have, obviously, the banjo at the end. Over here, the harp actually plays it to end the first A section. The strings actually play it in the B section, but then the marimba repeats it to bring us back into the section C. Part of the benefit of having things that sound the same throughout the song is that it should all loop very seamlessly to where you can kind of tell where things start if you really pay attention, but you should really be able to get lost in the world of the song. So when we come back here to section C and it sounds the same, you might think, oh, we're back at the beginning, of course. But the bass flute should cue you in that something is different. And you should not even notice that here comes the loop point. Overall, this was a really fun project in trying to figure out how to bring in the idea of a Lego video game into D&D. And I feel like the Halfling Druid really let me bring in some of that brightness, that optimism, and a lot of fun into this track. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Thank you very much for watching. And if you did enjoy it, make sure that you like and subscribe because this channel is all about Lego video game music, whether it's stuff that I make or about the stuff that's already been made. So if you're interested in seeing more of that, also make sure that you hit the little bell. Leave me a comment if you liked this just to let me know what you thought about it. And I will see you guys in the next one.